G'day Bomber fans, we've got a bit of a late upload, but I did have a little busy weekend, so yeah, we've got some play ratings from Thursday's game of footy. I've had plenty of time to think about it, plenty of time to forget about the game entirely, because it does feel like it was a lifetime ago. But yeah, play ratings from the Brisbane loss. Let's get right into it. Starting off pretty strong with Andy McGrath. And look, I said in my review, I love John Denver. Great voice, great songwriter. I think he wrote his own songs. I'm going to assume he did. And if he didn't, don't tell me in the comments because it'll make me upset. But yeah, I'm happy when I hear him sing. Unfortunately, I guess not unfortunately, but Charlie Cameron, he kicks the first goal of the game. Country Roads rings around the Gabba, but then for the rest of the night, we don't hear it. And that is because of Andy McGrath. So on one hand, I don't hear John Denver. I'm unhappy. On the other, Andy McGrath's keeping one of the best small forwards in the league down. And that's Andy McGrath. It's games like these that really prove just how important and valuable he is to our system. He's such a good lockdown defender. One of the best in the league, that isn't a weird statement. I can probably name maybe 2 or 3 lockdown defenders as good as Andy McGrath. He only had 4 kicks for the game, Andy. Didn't do a lot offensively, but I'm going to give him an 8. We needed our defenders to be really sound, and Pidge was on one of the most dangerous, forwards in the league and kept him quiet. So he gets an 8. Just an awesome role player's performance, I thought. Elijah Tsatas, he came on in the 4th. He was the sub. And let me say, I hate this bloke as the sub. Nothing against Tsatas. I don't think it's a him issue, but he's just not a good sub player. This is a guy who really does his damage inside the contest, in close and personal. And I feel like the advantage of a sub, late in the game is work rate around the ground and in open play and leg speed and good ball movement. And I just don't think his strengths really line up to, this role. While he was on, he did some okay things. He had some nice clearances. But yeah, there were a few moments he was pretty poor in some contests. There was one against McCluggage late, which led to a shot on goal. He looked slow to get going in close and personal, which is always going to happen when you're the sub. And I guess that kind of coincided with the Lions getting a go at stoppages a bit more. Yeah, I just thought he wasn't really impactful as the sub. Again, that's not his fault. I think it's just poor coaching. So, what do I give him? Or do I give him a 6 or a 5? Played less than a quarter, 6 touches, 2 clearances. You know what? That would look better spread out over a whole game. I'm going to give him a 6 because I just don't think it's a him problem. I think, I don't get why he's the sub. And if he's playing next week against the Blues, it better be for full minutes. Otherwise, I don't want him playing. I don't want to see him as the sub again. I'd rather him in the VFL. Anyway, Jye Caldwell. I was on 10 watch with Jye Caldwell, by the way. It was very much 10 watch here. It was almost a perfect game. He really wasn't far off being perfect. He was massive for us. And that third quarter was, that was something else. That was pretty crazy. He was good, for most of the game, but the third was, pretty nutty. He had 16 touches in the third, 7 clearances, 3 tackles, 5 score involvements, and a goal. That is, that's a good performance for a whole game of footy, let alone one quarter. That obviously caught Fagan's attention, and Dunkley went to tag him out of the game in the 4th, which he did. That is why I haven't given Caldwell the 10, because I thought he didn't really do too much in the 4th because of Dunkley. But no, I thought he was our best player. Not quite best on ground. Hugh McCluggage gets those honours. But yeah, I gave him the 3 votes. Incredible stuff. He's well and truly back after that slower return from injury. He's looking good. And from Caldwell to Zach Merrett, our skipper. I'm seeing a bit of criticism with Merrett, and to be fair, he had some stinky moments late in the game, a couple of really costly turnovers, one led to a goal, I believe. But I think if you take him out of that defence, we look so much shakier. We really needed some class back there. There's no Reed, there's no Ridley. We lost our best distributors by foot, so we moved Merrett behind the ball. He was barely in the midfield all night. I think maybe a few centre bounces and that's it. And yeah, I thought he really helped us out in quite a few situations back there. I really thought that was a good glimpse into the future in a weird way. I know that, no one thinks of Merrett and future, but, he's not going to be a midfielder forever. And Merrett himself has preached longevity for quite some time. But yeah, here we really saw him work around the ground, spend plenty of time on the field. He ran the most he has all season. He was in the top 5 for distance covered on the night. That's rare for Merrett. He racked up the pill again. I think that's in maybe 3 or 4 years' time, when we've got a proper midfield with, hopefully some star players, Martin in his peak, Caldwell in his peak, Durham in his peak, these guys 27 years old. By then, Merrett will be in his 30s. Hopefully, or I guess he will still be playing footy. I think this will be his role. It's kind of like Dane Zorko when he's still great, but, probably there's better options in the midfield, so you move him to defence where he can use the footy, and I think that is exactly what we're going to do with Merrett. So I'm going to give him an 8. I thought he had some down moments at times, but, I thought we... luckily, he played this role against a great team when we needed him to, because we really needed him back there. He gave us quite a bit. So, yeah, good job from Merrett, 8. Let me know what you think down below, because I have seen some people divided about Merrett. And I think that's going to be the case for a few players in this video, actually. Another one is Ben Hobbs. I've seen some criticism of Ben Hobbs. I really liked him. I thought he was really giving it a crack. You could clearly see he was trying. He was a bit fumbly. And it's weird because, usually you can smack his ball use. He's not the best kick, but some of his foot skills were elite. That pass to set up Setterfield's goal is not something I thought Ben Hobbs would pull out. If anything, the issue was his hand skills. He had a few double grabs on ground level, which, he let the lines apply pressure when they shouldn't have, moments like that. That isn't usually something we knock on Hobbs, so that was interesting. But no, I thought he was involved. He was having a crack. It was probably one of his better games for the year. I'm going to give him a 7 out of 10, I think he keeps his spot for next week, which I might not have said, in the last few weeks before this one. Isaac Kako. For a few weeks, you did feel like his impact was decreasing. Some were saying a rest in the Rezzies was on the cards. I don't think he looked tired. Some said he looked tired. I think he was just a young kid, not really hitting his straps, which is fine. Every young player has gone through periods like that. And I'm sure Kako, even when he turns good, he'll go through another period like that again. But yeah, this week, I thought he was much better. Not because of his impact or anything. He didn't score. But I thought he was having to battle against Noah Answorth, one of the best lockdown defenders in the league. And I thought he had some great moments. He was lively linking up. He found a chance inside 50, which he should have nailed, but didn't. It was a bit of an almost night at times. But yeah, I thought that was a good test and one that he passed. He didn't score, but he was finding ways to impact the game when in the last few weeks he wasn't. So yeah, I think we stick with him in the AFL. He's not scoring right now, but he's getting valuable experience like this. I think he would have learnt plenty from this game. And it wasn't a learning experience because he was shut out completely. It was him having moments while learning. So yeah, I liked this game more than his last few. Good energy about him. You felt like there was a good energy with Kako. He gets a 6. And from Kako to Gresham, and this is going to be unpopular, okay? I know plenty would be calling for 2s and 3s in the comments, and his first half was, he, how do we say it nicely? He looked sloppy, let's say that. I thought he was sloppy, slow, disinterested. He was arguing with teammates. He was arguing with runners. I hated the first half. But his response in the second half was great. I talked a bit about him being a leader of the club, given his experience. And that first half was far from anything to do with leadership. But for me, if I'm Isaac Kako seeing my partner in crime having a mare, frustrated in the forward line, but then seeing him lift in the second, I feel like that would lift me. In the second half, he had 8 disposals, 6 of which were score involvement, so everything he was touching was turning to gold. Kicked a ripper in the fourth, set up Caddy's goal of the year contender with a really smart centering play along the ground. Yeah, if I'm grading him on the first half, it's really bad. It's probably the worst half of footy this year. And to be fair, we should say he had an injury concern. I don't know what it was exactly. I didn't really get a good glimpse, but he was sore. That's why he was arguing with Durham, because both of them were fighting over who plays out of the goal square, because both of them, could hardly move. But no, really good response. Horrid first half, much better in the second half. I'm giving him a 6 out of 10. I know plenty will dislike that. I thought, given his injury and how poor he was to start, I thought it was good to see him up and about later in the game. So yeah, 6 out of 10 for Gresham. Good response. I think he keeps his spot against the Blues because of that. But yeah, another poor game, and yeah, we're on VFL watch because he hasn't been great since coming back, or even just since the start of the season. He was one of our best to start the year, and then he's dropped off a bit since then. But yeah, 6 out of 10. Will Setterfield. I wasn't watching too closely this weekend with Setterfield. I didn't know if he was sticking with Neil or someone in the guts. It'd be a weird tag if he was because of the difference in size and style. Maybe he was just a body there. But yeah, he was doing pretty well in the guts. He was again tackling everything. Brisbane players, umpires, pigeons. He was tackling whatever he could. He was just in there being a tough nut. He got on the scoreboard, which is rare. I like a good Setterfield goal. No, he was good. He's quickly proving to us that he needs a contract extension, I think, because I thought his career was done at the start of the year. I wrote him off early, but he's been really good for us this season, and it's good to see. And he's keeping guys like Parrish. How did I forget Parrish's name? He's keeping Parrish out of the team, even Shield out of the team. It's good. I'm going to give him a 7 out of 10. And this kind of player, right? Because it's good to have a pure mid that we can rely on while everyone around him switches around. That is what I hope Tsatas becomes eventually. I would like to see him become a Will Setterfield type, but it's hard because he can't really become that while Will Setterfield himself is there. Jayden Laverde, he was this guy, the warrior. So if you've been living under a rock, we've got no key defenders. Our usual trio is Ridley, Mackay and Reid. When Ridley went down, we brought in Hayes, but then Hayes did his ACL, so Laverde comes in as our third defender. Our fifth string key back as our third defender. Then Reid gets injured, then Mackay gets injured. Cox, who could have come in, goes back into concussion protocols. Laverde is now, our only key defender, and he's barely 190 centimetres, going up against Eric Hipwood, who's a whole head taller. He's shaky early. He gives away a 50-metre penalty to Charlie Cameron. Really sloppy stuff. But from there, after that moment, he's solid. He's a brick wall. Some of those efforts were incredible. We had no right to be stopping, keeping the Lions down to below triple figures. It's not like we were stemming their flow in inside 50s. They had 62 inside 50s. They really should have scored more, but we kept them down. We stopped their attacks, and Laverde was a massive reason for that. He made some mistakes, yes, but most of what he did was good. The only issue with our structure is that we can't really intercept now. That's going to be a worry against the Blues, I reckon. But no, Laverde was great. I'm going to give him an 8 out of 10. That was a really good game. Archie Perkins. All right, so I think we can probably say that he plays his best footy forward of the ball. I think... we've experimented with him in the midfield. Parrish is coming back soon. I think it just makes sense to bring Parrish into the midfield and put Perkins back up forward because, I just don't think... I think the last couple of weeks, it hasn't exactly worked. And I just think he's better suited as a forward who can impact at stoppages and not a stoppage player who can, swing forward. I think he's more of a forward midfielder than a midfield forward, if you get me. I think this experience is good. It's a bit of an ace up the sleeve moment for Scott, to just kind of test it out and have some, something to rely on if needed. But yeah, he was in almost half our centre bounces, featured heavily at stoppages, didn't do a lot, looked really uncomfortable. I don't really think it's a diss on Perkins. I think he's been awesome this year, probably one of our more consistent players. But yeah, this game was probably his worst of the season. I'd say he was the worst player on the park, in fact. So I think next week against the Blues, he should be back in the forward line, and Parrish should be back in the team, as I said. I'm going to give... What do I give him? I'm going to give him a 4. I really didn't think he was any good. But that is more the role and the position than Perkins himself. I think he's been massive for us this year, and a big reason why we've just completely forgotten about the stringer trade. So yeah, a big blip in the wrong direction, but I back him to be kicking snags soon enough. I'm giving Perkins a 4. Alright, where are we? We're up to Old Gold. I love this bloke, I almost don't want to see him rested because the narrative around our young team and Goldie being there is so funny. Because he really does bring up the average age. Our average age for this game was 24.5. If you replace Goldie with Draper or Bryan, it goes below 24, and we look very, very young. So yeah, I think he makes us look older than what we are. But no, he battled hard. The Lions rested McInerney, so that really helped. So he was up against Darcy Fort, who, to be fair to him, is a premiership player. And yeah, they were locked in a pretty good battle, those two. It was pretty equal, I'd say. When you look at their stats back to back, there's not too much splitting them. But I think, Goldie passes the eye test. I think he had the better game of the two. Keeps playing his role. Good stuff. He gets a 7. Saw him kick a snag. We love a good Old Gold snag. That is great to see. Peter Wright. I'm going to give him a... I'm going to think about it. I'm going to talk about it and think about it because I'm tossing up between a 7 and an 8. I thought he did plenty for us, and especially early, right? I reckon at halftime he was in my votes. His second quarter was so important. And that was also an important quarter in the grand scheme of things as well, because that's when we started to wrestle back some control as a team. And look, the Lions, they were taller, they had bigger bodies, but Wright having an impact in the air made that advantage less felt. 15 touches, 2 goals, 6 marks, did a bit in the ruck as always. That's something we need to talk about more. This guy's at his best when he's in the forward line, taking clunks, kicking snags, but he is having to change up a bit now and pinch hit in the ruck. That change has probably taken away his scoring potential. I think he's on 13 goals for the season, could easily be closer to 20 if we still had Draper or Bryan in the side. But no, he's having to change his role, and it's helping out, us in our injury situation. He's been pretty important these last few weeks, which is great because, many were ready to write him off at the start of the year. So yeah, I'm going to give 2 metre Peter a 7. I'm going to give him an 8. I'm going to be generous. I thought he was one of our better players on the night. I was tempted to give him the role player instead of Laverde, but in the end I didn't. So yeah, 8 out of 10 for Peter Wright. Moving on to Archibald Roberts, who was really good. And I know he's had better games with better stats. He's had games in the 30s disposals. But I think, even though he had 20 touches and some down moments, there was, he lost a regulation one-on-one marking contest against Calamachi, I want to say. But in the end, 20 touches, doesn't look great, but I really liked the way he played. And I liked the way he moved around. He and Prior really gave us a lot moving forward on that side. It's really important because we didn't have heaps of our best ball users in there, so we needed Roberts to be, punchy and gain some meterage. I liked him a lot. And you know what I really liked about this game, right? And I know you guys will agree. So Roberts stays on till the end, has a real impact. He's one of our best. I almost gave him votes. And then on the flip side, his fellow rising star contender Levi Ashcroft was subbed off tactically. And those two right now are the favourites for the award at the moment, Levi and Archie Roberts. So it was pretty cool to see our player have the better night of the two. And look, I still think Levi wins the award. He does look pretty good, but yeah, it's cool to see Archie remaining consistent. He hasn't really had a bad game yet. Not even just this year, but at Essendon. So yeah, he gets another 8. He is racking them up at the moment. Moving down, Sam Durham. Tough one to judge. I feel like, Gresham, if this is Gresham, right? Slight injury concern, poor game because of it. Everyone hates on him. There are plenty of people who I think would think that Durham had more of an impact in the game over Gresham. And part of that is because Gresham is just more of a whipping boy and everyone loves Durham, me myself included. But yeah, does had 8 touches, a goal, which was pretty lucky in the end. Another assist. I think there's 2 score involvements. He was up forward pretty deep for most of the game because he couldn't run out in the midfield with that ankle. And I'm not trying to discount his effort or anything. I get that he was injured. I'm more using him as a reason to compare him and Gresham because, yeah, I can predict that quite a few negative Gresham comments will be there, just basing it off Essendon Twitter during the game. Whereas on the flip side, everyone's thrilled with Durham staying on and playing through his niggle. I love it too. I think it's great. It is toughness. It shows that he can play a role when not 100%. But yeah, I'm going to give him a 5. I can't really give him anything lower, seeing as he was playing injured, but I don't really think he justifies a bigger score. He had some good moments, but because of his injury, he didn't really have much impact on the game. So yeah, 5 out of 10. Hopefully the 10-day break, we find out that it's just an ankle roll and not a syndesmosis, because that would be really unfortunate. Yeah. Moving on, Jaxon Prior. Really sloppy start. Had some shocking moments in defence, inside 50. Some players love playing their old club, some don't. And I thought that, early we saw a player who looked a bit shaky because of the spotlight, playing against his old club in game 50. But I was really pleased at the way he bounced back and got into the game after that. I thought he was really good in the third quarter specifically, and that is where I started to notice him really get going. He was one of those members of the back 6 brigade that just remained solid all night after some sloppy mistakes early. Same with Laverde, but probably to a lesser extent than Laverde. I don't think Pryor's worthy of an 8 like his teammate. He had less to do than Doz, but I thought without Prior we would probably have seen a worse scoreline. So yeah, I'm going to give him an 8. He's quickly become a bit of a whipping boy. Not too sure why. He played some shockers early, but since then he's been pretty important to our system while numbers around him are recovering. So yeah, 7 out of 10 for Prior. We'll see how he goes, having to line up on Curnow a few times next week. Now, guys, it is time for a drink break. And for this one, I need to leave the room. So the magic of editing will have me returning straight away in 1 second. Okay, I am back. So for you guys, I wasn't gone. But for me, I went to the kitchen to get this drink ready. I had a little nap on the way. The couch looked irresistible. I just, couldn't resist. So I had to have a little nap. We're back now. I've got this drink. And look, I'll start by saying, before I get into this, I am not a big fan of scotch, and I'm a lightweight. So I'm having alcohol at about 4 p.m. Alright. And it's an alcohol I don't like. But I got this suggestion a while ago from Liu. It was scotch combined with orange and mango juice. Okay. There's more instructions to that. I'm just, giving you the basic gist. So, yeah. Here is a Scotch orange and mango juice concoction created by Liu and drunk by me. Alright. It kind of tastes like if you were to combine Scotch with orange and mango juice. But no, I actually don't mind that, And I'm not just saying this because, I want you guys to think I enjoy the drinks. I don't enjoy scotch, but I'm going to drink this, the whole way. And, look, if this was a drink that I enjoy drinking, if this was like a vodka something, and I enjoyed it this amount, I would probably give it like a 5. But because it's a scotch, something I don't like, I'm going to give it a 6. Because it surprised me a little bit. And you know what? Maybe it's because I put in a lot of orange and mango juice, but I can taste the scotch, okay? Believe me when I say that. I didn't just... This isn't just an orange and mango drink. So yeah, thank you for the suggestion. We'll get back to the player ratings. Please leave in more drink ideas down in the comments because we need to stay hydrated, okay, guys? It is very important. Keep drinking whatever liquids, you have in front of you. If they're, if they can be drunk. Obviously, if it's something that you shouldn't be drinking, like, detergent, avoid that. But if there's a water next to that, drink. All right, Mason Redman. Yeah, he was great. He had the runs against Richmond last week, so he had a bit of a down game. It probably impacted his performance. You don't like having the runs, it's never good. He probably chose a better pre-game meal this week and looked a bit energized, you'd say, unlike me in the first half of this video. I think he was our, I'll say, 4th or 5th best player for me. It was Caldwell and Martin who were 1 and 2. Then it was a toss of the coin between Caddy, Roberts and Redman. I considered all of them for 1 vote. In the end, I gave it to Caddy. But I loved what Redman gave us. 26 touches, 600 metres gained, a few really big defensive acts. There was one spoil, and I probably haven't remembered this right, but I feel like Logan Morris took a mark inside 50. He had a better option. I think it was Kai Lohman or Calamarchi. It was a small forward. Little chip kick over Redman's head. He does that, tries to find him on a better angle. Redman's onto it, sprints towards the player, throws his arms out and affects the spoil with his body turned away from the ball. And it was just awesome. It saved a goal. It was really tough and courageous too, because he's not really thinking about what Lohman or Archie, whoever it was, is going to do. So yeah, it was great. A lot of moments like that. I should say Redman was a bit fumbly at times. Maybe the greasy conditions just did him dirty, but there were some poorer moments. I know somewhat unhappy with his game, especially early. He was one being criticised a bit. But no, I loved it. I thought he was great. Feel free to disagree with me down below, but I'm going to give him an 8. I thought he was one of our better players on the night. Xavier Duursma. Now, I could have missed something here, because, watching on TV, it's always harder to properly, understand what's happening in the game. Your eyes just get drawn towards the ball, whereas when you're at the ground, you can watch the ground. And I get that we were throwing numbers back. He might have been one of them. I saw him back there in a contest once or twice. But yeah, he just didn't seem to be doing heaps. I could have missed a roll. Sometimes there are games like that for wingers, actually, where, the ball just isn't down your end. It's being played around you and not with you. And that's where it's harder to judge, on TV, like I said. You guys at the ground could probably help me out and let me know if Duursma was doing something a bit more subtle that I didn't catch. But I'm just going to assume that he had a quiet night. I'm going to give him a 5. Just didn't get to see much of him, which is sad because, we like seeing Duursma. We like seeing this bloke get the footy. So, yeah, he gets a 5 out of 10. I'm going to assume it was a quiet night, but let me know if he did have a role if you were at the ground or if you saw him have a role that I just didn't quite catch. Nate Caddy, here we go. Yeah, how good is this guy? Just a really exciting glimpse into the future. And not even just the future, but I mean now, I guess, So, all right, so the game starts. His first quarter, doesn't get a touch. But I didn't think he was out of the game. He was putting in a bit of a shift to apply some heat. There was one contest in particular where he forces a turnover just through corralling, and it results in was that the Kako behind? Or maybe it was someone. It might have been Gresham behind. But yeah, then we see him, really start to get going in the second and third. He takes a big contested mark in the second, which would have given him confidence. The third quarter was, it was him and Caldwell getting us back in the game. And really, it was the Nate Caddy show. And the funny thing is, right, he finishes the game with 10 touches, but it felt like he was everywhere. I mean, like, he was taking massive clunks. He was kicking snags. Goal of the year contenders. That kick over his head was amazing. Then he had that miss of the year contender where he's running into an open goal and just scuffs it. Brad Scott laughing in the coach's box because, you can't really help but laugh at a moment like that. I was laughing. He was taking players on, going for runs down the wing. Every time he touched the ball, it was exciting and something was happening. And something a little bit more underrated in his game was how he helped nullify Harris Andrews. Because Harris Andrews, one of the best intercept players in the league. He had 6 intercept possessions in the first half. In the second half, he has 2 and 5 touches. He's out of the game in the second half, and a big reason for that is Caddy. So, yeah, just a really great game. That's his best game in the red and black. I know his stats don't look like much, but that was a really good game of footy. Not just a promising one. He's played promising games. He was promising against Sydney, promising, at times this year, but I thought he was really good. And he looked like an AFL player. Hopefully we see more of that to close out the year, but if we don't, we've seen a really good glimpse. It's super exciting, and I can't really think of the last time that we had a player on our list that we just, we kind of know will be big. There is serious superstar potential here with Nate Caddy. He obviously has a long way to go and lots to improve on, but to me, his attitude suggests that he's going to keep working hard and won't get ahead of himself. So yeah, awesome stuff from Caddy. We nailed this draft pick, so I don't say this often, but thank you, Adrian Dodoro. That was really good stuff, trading up to get him, and Archie Roberts in the same draft. Keep that in mind. So we talk a lot of crap about Dodoro, but he's really helped us here. And Vigo Vicentini in that rookie draft. Matt Guelfi. Good to have him in around the forward line. He's playing whatever roles he can. And this is where you guys can help me again. So I don't think he was locked on Zorko all game, but I saw him on Zorko at times. And Zorko, is incredible. He tore the Hawks to shreds last week. It may not have, been a proper role. I didn't think Zorko was a huge factor in the game, though. And I'm going to give Guelfi some credit for that. He did get a bit, 20-odd touches, but he wasn't dominant. And Guelfi himself was applying pressure inside 50, the best pressure forward in the line. Pretty poor stats on paper, you'd say. You probably wouldn't think he did too much, but I thought he was playing his role. He was making sure that they couldn't score and transition as much. I didn't think he was great, but yeah, I think a 6 feels fair. I said last week this is someone who would have made that Bulldogs game with Bailey Dale a lot easier. He's just someone who nails down a role and plays it to the best of his ability. Sometimes he does this and kicks some goals, like he did against the Giants with Whitfield last year. Other times it's like this, where he just goes about his business and doesn't join in on the fun. So yeah, 6 out of 10 for Guelfi. I'm going to have another sip of the drink. I'm just, making sure you guys know that I do enjoy it. You know what? It's actually starting to grow on me. That's pretty good. Anyway, should I bump it up to a 7? One more sip. That's actually a pretty good combo. I didn't, I was with my sister getting this drink in Coles, by the way. Or the makings for it. And the bottler. And she's like, what the bloody hell are you doing? scotch and orange juice, orange and mango juice. That's not going to work. But alas, it does. Angus Clarke on the wing. Well, actually, was he down back or on the wing? I feel like, maybe he was playing a defensive wing role a bit, maybe like Duursma. He had some nice moments going forward from defence. Last week, I guess he's playing as that really attacking wingman who's pushing so hard to the goal square. But, obviously we need more numbers down back, so maybe his wing role is, I guess, the other way. I wasn't really paying too much attention because I was just so hyped about how we were playing. So I wasn't paying too much attention to individual players. So could have been playing defence. I think it was more likely he was a defensive wingman. But yeah, I feel like he backed up that debut well. He looked at home. He didn't look like he was a skinny kid playing his second game. He looked like a footy player, having a decent game of footy. Not great, or good, but I'd say decent. It was a hard-working performance from young pup. I'm going to give him a 6. Like I said with Kako early in the year, though, I feel like a good 6 is more than high scores at times because it shows you what a young player is going to do when they're kind of at their base level, And this is not... If this is him not exceeding expectations, that's perfect, I wouldn't mind this every game, I know he'll probably have bigger matches like he did on Dreamtime and he'll probably have some stinkers. He's a young player. But you can see how a game like this could really help the team if he plays like it more. So, yeah, I think a 6 is fair. Looks like he's found a role in the team, which is really good. Speaking of finding a role in the team, Nic Martin, the midfielder. Yeah, I mean, he gets a 10 last week, followed by a 9 this week. I think he's a pretty good contender for form player of, not just Essendon, but the comp right now. He is playing unbelievable footy. He had 29 touches, 2 goals, 4 clearances. Yeah, Martin in the midfield is just different. And the thing I love about this is, so Merrett's at halfback, new role for him. We're now seeing the emergence of, I guess, our next A-grade midfield group. Maybe not A-grade, but I think, Martin, Durham, Caldwell. We didn't see Durham too much there, but those three they're going to lead us in the midfield for the next few years. They're all around the same age. Merrett's a bit older, so he can obviously play midfield in the next few years, but when he winds down, we've got Martin there who can play midfield as we know, or he can play anywhere else. He can play anywhere on the ground. He is such an awesome player to have on the team, and it's maybe why he's a proper contender for the Everything Essendon Player of the Year award. He's now not far behind Zach Merrett, which is fun. He's got a contender. But yeah, 9 for Marto. I really don't have to say much more. Him and Caldwell were our best. Onto a debutant. Another debutant. How good is this? Debutant number 7, Zak Johnson. Yeah, I thought that was a really promising debut. Obviously, it's not, Angus Clarke levels where he kicks 3 goals in front of 80-odd K at the MCG, but I thought he looked good. I thought he was a bit shaky early. I would say his first quarter, maybe half, he clearly looked like a kid out there making his debut. But as he settled in, maybe in the third, he started to really show off what we can be keen for in the future. He is a lovely kick, and there were a few on the night that got me out of my seat. There was one to Caddy on the wing, laced him out on the run. Another to Hobbs going inside 50. It was the one where Hobbs marked inside 50 and then passed to Setterfield. The kick before that to Hobbs was probably better than Hobbs's kick. And his ball use was great by foot. He was intercepting. In fact, when he was subbed off the ground, he had the most intercept possessions from our team. He ended the night with 6 from 3 and a bit quarters. Yeah, he looked at home. He's going to play against the Blues, you'd think. He'll probably play quite a few more games this year. I really think this guy's a big part of our future. I know that he's the 7th debutant, but after Kako, he's probably... It's in a toss of the coin between him and Clarke, who I think will be the better player. I think he's someone that we should be really excited for. Still very young as well. He's the youngest player in the comp right now. So, yep, I'm going to give him a 7. Really, really good signs, and I think he's only going to show more. He's someone we should be watching for a Rising Star nomination, I reckon, this year. And someone else that might get a Rising Star nomination this year, Archie Day-Wicks. Probably his best of the 3 games he's played. It felt like he was more involved, getting touches, getting himself in good areas up the field. He didn't do it a lot inside 50. Most of what he did was probably around the centre square, wing areas and open play. And there were some moments that maybe showed inexperience. There was one I remember where he gets tackled after receiving the pill, could just hold it in, draw a ball up, but instead he tries to get it out and maybe he's scared of holding the ball, but he lets it out. It results in a turnover and I think maybe a goal to Brisbane. There are some moments of inexperience that creep in. That's bound to happen for a player this young. But all in all, I really liked the way he played. He stood up in tackles, he used the ball well, some really clever moments. There was, some moments in traffic that were pretty impressive, one or two. Good signs. And it's good that he's picked up early games this year. 3 so far. Might not even play against the Blues. We've got players returning from injury. Darcy Parish should be back. But yeah, I'm going to give him a 6. I thought he was decent. And to end the video, we have got Bradley Scott. Slow start in the coach's box. We looked pretty rusty early, but he got the boys going. He changed our game style, focused on ball movement and how we could best exploit stoppages. We didn't just throw numbers back at times to defend, but really slowed the Lions moving with pace, which is easier said than done. They destroyed the Hawks last week doing that. I liked the magnets that were moved. Merrett was doing well off halfback. He managed our injuries well. I didn't like how slow we were to bring Merrett back into the guts late in the game. We needed him there when, the game needed to be won. And I didn't like Tsatas as the sub. I'm never going to like that. You can never convince me that he's a good sub option. He needs to play from the start or not at all. That's my opinion. Really good coaching performance, but not perfect. So I'm not going to give him a 10. I'm not going to give him a 9. I thought we did really well to keep Brisbane close, but we didn't get the win. I'm going to give him an 8 out of 10. He gets a better grade in a losing side than he did last weekend in a winning team against the Tigers. But yeah, that is that. Good stuff. Cheers everyone for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. Hopefully I didn't take up too much of your time. This took about 2 hours for me to do because I was napping, I was getting drinks ready, I was maybe watching a bit of the footy. But yeah, that is all. Make sure you like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and as always, go Bombers!